I kind of wanted to kick off this page and go over some metrics on an engine that I had a discussion with somebody about. They actually sent me a message on one of the engines I had for sale or have for sale on my page. I put the specifications up there, and one of the questions was, is the piston to head clearance on that Predator engine that I have posted for sale? Now, I will say I don't disagree with this guy, but I'll follow that up with, this is what I've done and this is what I know works for me. This is the way I can get a little more performance out of these engines. But I will also say with that, I'm not running these engines at 10, 11,000 RPMs. I run my engines 8, 9,000 RPMs tops, and I build them for more bottom end torque, takeoff power, peeling the tires, that type of thing. Being able to sling it into a corner and get out of it quickly. I'm not really looking for that top speed, top RPM, screaming on a straightaway type deal. So as I go into this a little bit more, and I figure out, as I start explaining some of this stuff, I'm going to go into a little more detail of this individual's thoughts on the conversation and the understanding of his side. But I'm also going to go through the thoughts and understanding of where I'm coming from with it and why I run the tolerances so tight on the piston to head clearance. And I've never had an issue with it. The engine that's posted for sale, I've ran it maybe 10 hours. Never had an issue with failure. Never had an issue with clearance on piston to head, piston to valve, anything like that. So I'll go through this engine that I have sitting next to me right here. I actually have a twin engine cart that I am in the middle of working on. So it's nowhere near the done stage, but the engines are mounted, and I got to do some machining yet on the heads and the axle. My dad owns a machine shop, so I gotta go over there and finish a couple things up when he has time to be able to help me out with it. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pull this head off of this engine, and we'll go through some of the characteristics that I like to run, some of the stuff that I like to do, the explanation of why I do it, and the explanation of why this other individual does it the way he does it. So let me adjust the camera real quick and I'll kind of get into that. All right. So this engine, it's a 212 non-Hemi Predator, very, very common engine, Harbor Freight bought engine, original 6.5 horse. This engine has been built, same with the one over here that you can kind of see. They're built twins, so everything that I have in this engine is the same that I have in that engine. There's no difference between them, and I'm going to build both of these the same way. Just like the one that I have for sale is a somewhat identical build to these. The only difference on that one is that one has a Hemi block with a non-Hemi head. So the blocks are a little bit different, the cam journals are a little bit different between the non-Hemi and the Hemi. But aside from that, you can build about the same amount of power between either platform. The reason why I went with a non-Hemi is because you can get similar flow rates out of these heads, but you have a lot more clearance internally. And I'll show you that difference here in just a second, but let's go ahead and get into pulling this head off. I'll show you why I run a tighter tolerance, go into the explanation, and then I'll show you the differences between the two heads. This head was just held on by one head bolt. I just have it on there to keep dirt out of it. since it is kind of in the middle of being built. See if I can get these push rods out of here. All right. Okay. As you can see on this engine, it is a zero-decked engine. It's probably kind of hard to tell from the video, but it is a zero-decked engine. There is no clearance or tolerance between the top of the piston and the top of the block. So this is all one flat surface right here. And as this piston, let me pull this, as this piston moves, you can see it go down. It'll come down, pull in air fuel, come back up, fire, pull back down, open exhaust valve, and there's your 4-stroke. Your exhaust is pushed out. Okay, so as you can see, this is at the top. Now, this head, again, is a non-hemi or non-hemispherical head. This is a used engine. That's why you see some carbon buildup inside here. I'm planning on cleaning this up. I haven't done that yet. Like I said, it's still in the stages of being built. So when I build these engines and when I use these heads with the zero deck, I run a 10 thousandths head gasket, and it looks like this. It's a standard steel head gasket, 10 thousandths thick. Now, the question he had was, what kind of issues do you run into, or do you run into issues having a 10 thousandths head gasket, zero deck, and basically no clearance aside from the 10 thousandths between the head and the piston, the top of the piston? No, I don't have any issues with it. I made that clear to him that I don't have issues, nor have I had issues with that. But the reason why I run these so tight is because, again, I'm not running them at a very, very high RPM like some of these guys that are out there racing and pushing the limits of everything they have every lap around the track. I use these for fun. I try to keep my RPMs a little bit lower, and that's why I don't run into these issues. Now, the other side of that is both of these heads are going to be milled about 60 thousandths. So this combustion chamber is ultimately going to get smaller. Right now it's a 18 cc combustion chamber. I'm going to actually have, or a 20 cc, I'm going to have it milled to about 15 cc's to get that combustion chamber smaller. Now what that's going to do is it's going to raise the compression of that engine. More compression, more power, so on and so forth. So his thinking and his question, you know, do you, like I said, do you have any issues with that? No, I don't. The second thing is the common thought process when building an engine, and this goes to small block Ford, small block Chevys, Chrysler, Mopar, whatever engine that you're building, even these small ones. You want to have a 30 thousandths tolerance between the top of your piston and your head. And I've built engines the majority of my life with that in mind. If you're building an engine and you're trying to get dependability, longevity, where you don't have to tear it down, you don't have to, you're able to push the limits of it, or if you're building it to race where you're going to have stretches on your crankshaft, connecting rods, stuff like that, because you're pushing past the envelope of what that engine's really made for, that's when you're going to run into clearancing issues, and you run into connecting rod stretch or crank stretch, or you know, just with the heating of those components. Ultimately, you heat a piece of metal up, it's going to expand slightly. Those of you that have done machining or any type of bearing replacements, race replacements, that type of thing, you use heat to expand a piece of metal. You use cold to shrink it. Same concept applies as an engine is running. As you get heat in there, the material is going to expand, so on and so forth. So, with that being said, I build my engines for a little bit more performance, a little bit less dependability, and I say that I say that kind of with a grain of salt because I've never had any issues with them. There's just higher potential to have issues with them. Now, if I'm going to build an engine for a customer, I'm probably going to leave those tolerances. I will shave the head down, bump up the compression by the combustion chamber, but I will leave those tolerances a little bit looser so that individual doesn't run into problems down the road that maybe that engine isn't quite where it needs to be, or the tolerances aren't quite what they should be. Maybe crank bearing wears a little bit prematurely and it's not caught, that type of deal. I'll leave that tolerance in there so there's no question on whether it's going to be able to perform for an extended period of time. So again, the constant thought behind that, or the ongoing thought behind that, is 30 thousandths between the head and piston. We do it that way because the engine will last longer. It'll give a better clearance. That'll stop it from potentially smacking between each other. I run them tighter to get a little bit more performance, and I'm not really worried about the piston smacking it. I don't run them at a high enough RPM to have that stretch happen. I also don't really expect to get the amount of hours out of it that I would for, like, if I were to buy one of these and put it on a rototiller and I want it to run for 10 plus years, or a log splitter or whatever. I'm not really worried about that. The engines that I have, I take them apart usually annually, inspect everything, make sure that there's no premature wear, check bearings, so on and so forth. So I don't have that concern. I would rather squeeze that little bit extra performance and just make sure I go through and take care of my stuff. So the other side of that, that I was going to continue to talk about. So the Hemi head and non-Hemi head. Let me go grab my Hemi head. So this is a Hemi head. I don't know if you can see it real well, but it's dished inside there versus this one. So this one is flat with the valves straight in, up and down. This one's dished. The valves are actually at an angle on this head. If I hold these heads kind of up and down from each other, the top one actually has a larger combustion chamber, which then correlates to a lower compression value. Now you can mill these heads and get them to bump the compression up slightly. But if you port, polish, and rework these heads, you can get them to flow near what this head will. It's going to be pretty close, especially if you put bigger valves and do some other work to it. The benefit of using this head versus this head is the clearance. And this is kind of the other side that I wanted to get into with this, was these engines that I build with the non-Hemi head, I still have plenty of piston to valve clearance, which is where more of my concern is, instead of piston to head clearance. Now, my concern lies in there, in that aspect more, because I like to run bigger cams, potentially ratio rockers, depending on what I'm doing. But I would much rather have the clearance between the valves and the piston than the head and the piston. Sorry, the head and the piston. So that's kind of in a nutshell, piston to head clearance, what you should have for piston to head clearance. The These Hemi engines, Predator Hemi engines, they usually run a thicker head gasket, and the reason why, so these will run a 0110 head gasket, which is a 10 thousandths head gasket. They typically run an 045 head gasket on this because you have, on a stock engine, you basically have almost zero deck. This is actually sitting down inside the sleeve some, but you have a flat top piston also. Well, as these valves open, let me see if I can get one to move. This has heavier valve springs in it, so it's a little difficult, but as these move, they come in at an angle. So you need that additional clearance to be able to clear your piston to valve as these open and close. As these ones open and close, they go straight down. So you can tighten those tolerances up. You don't need to cut valve reliefs in here. Again, you can do other things to modify these engines and run the Hemi head and do what you need to do with that if you really are set on running a Hemi head, just for the flow factor of it. But what I will say is a lot of the times you'll have to cut a valve relief inside the piston to make sure that the valves on that Hemi head will clear, especially if you're going to run a tighter tolerance between head to piston value. So that is just a little explanation of why I run my tolerances so tight. The understanding of the 030 or 30 thousandths value on piston to head clearance, it's there. I've built engines, like I said, a lot of my life with that in mind and that thought. These smaller engines, they don't have near as much flex. They're all aluminum. They're not made of a bunch of different components kind of scabbed together, especially if you're starting to build them. You have a steel crank, but everything else is aluminum, so the expansion is going to be almost identical through the entire engine. You know, your valves are steel, but you're not going to get much as far as valve expansion and stuff like that. So I just want to give a quick explanation. It seemed like I needed to make a video to kind of get that out there, kind of get that through, and the background explanation of that. And I don't know if I said it, but my piston to valve clearance is about 25 thousandths. There's plenty of room, so if something gives slightly as that's coming down, the valve's full open, as the piston's coming up, it's not going to hit anything. I still have that 25 thousandths clearance, and like I said, if I'm not worried about the piston to head at 10 thousandths, I'm really not worried about the piston to valve at 25 thousandths. Yeah. Thanks for visiting my page. If you guys need any work done, I can do custom builds, custom engines. I got a customer coming that's asking me to do a frame stretch on a mini bike, along with tear it down, go through the engine, make sure the parts are in the engine that he's thinking are in the engine. I got another guy that got a hold of me that he's kind of looking for a custom build 224. So I'll be making videos on those two things if they come through, and I'll be posting those to the page. So keep an eye out for them. Let me know what you guys think, and by all means get a hold of me if you have any questions or if you just need help. If you're a builder yourself and you're kind of getting into it and you just have some questions that need answered before you go ahead and pull the trigger, by all means reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you guys. I'm always about helping people learn, just like people teaching me as I came up through the ranks and came up through maintenance and doing this as a younger man. So appreciate you guys. Thank you. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.